At 11:47 p.m. on Thanksgiving, I was standing in a hospital supply closet with blood on my shoes when my son whispered through the phone, "Mom, I'm home. Don't be mad." I stopped breathing. "Noah," I said, gripping the shelf beside me, "why are you home? You're supposed to be at Grandma and Grandpa's." There was silence, then the tiny click of our apartment heater kicking on. They said there wasn't a seat for me. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. My parents had a dining room table big enough for 12. They had hosted every Thanksgiving since I was a child. They knew I was working overnight in the ER. They promised me Noah would be safe there. "What do you mean, no seat?" Noah's voice got smaller. Grandpa opened the door, looked behind me like he was checking if anyone saw, and said, "There's no seat for you tonight." I pressed the phone harder to my ear. "And Grandma?" "She was holding a plate," he said. She looked at me and said, "This is easier for everyone." Behind me, monitors beeped in the hallway. Nurses called for supplies. Someone needed me, but all I could picture was my 15-year-old son standing on my parents' porch in the sweater I told him looked nice, holding the pumpkin pie I had bought before my shift. A kid carrying dessert to a table where people had already decided he did not belong. "Why didn't you call me right away?" "I didn't want you to leave work," he said. "Grandma said you already had enough stress because of me." My hand went cold around the phone. "Noah, listen to me. You are not stress." "I know," he said too fast. He didn't know. I almost called my father right then. I could already hear his calm, controlled voice telling me I was overreacting. I could hear my mother sighing like Noah's pain was an inconvenience. But Noah whispered, "Please don't start a fight while I'm alone." So I didn't argue. Not that night. I opened the family group chat instead. There they were. My father carving turkey. My mother smiling beside candles. My cousins laughing around the long dining room table. Then I saw it. At the far end, beside the window, there was an empty chair. If there was no seat for my son, why had one been sitting there all night? I got home just before sunrise, still wearing my hospital badge. The apartment was almost completely dark. Only the small light above the stove was on, throwing a weak yellow strip across the kitchen floor. Noah was asleep on the couch. He was still wearing his good sweater. The one I had told him made him look older. His shoes were still on, one foot hanging slightly off the cushion, like he had sat down only for a second and lost the energy to move. On the counter sat the pumpkin pie. Unopened. Still in the plastic lid. I stood there for a moment with my keys in my hand, looking at that pie like it could explain how my parents had looked at my child and sent him away hungry. Then Noah stirred. "Mom?" I crossed the room and knelt beside him. "Hey, I'm here." He pushed himself upright, rubbing his eyes. "You didn't have to come home upset. That's not your job to manage." He looked toward the kitchen. "I'm sorry about the pie." I stared at him. "You're sorry about the pie?" His mouth tightened. I didn't know what to do with it. I sat beside him on the couch, close enough that our shoulders touched, but not so close that he felt trapped. "Tell me exactly what happened." He shook his head. "It's embarrassing." "Noah, I should have known better." That sentence landed harder than anything my parents could have said, because it meant they had trained him to expect less, to walk into cruelty and blame himself for not seeing it coming. "You should have known your grandparents would feed you on Thanksgiving," I said. "That is all you should have known." He stared at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "The driver dropped me off at 5:18. I had the pie. Grandpa opened the door before I even knocked all the way. He was waiting? I think so. What did he say?" Noah swallowed. He said, "You can come back when you stop making your grandmother explain you to people." I closed my eyes for half a second. "And your grandmother?" She came up behind him. She didn't say my name. She said the family had talked, and Thanksgiving wasn't the place for confusion. I turned toward him. "The family had talked?" He nodded. "I saw Aunt Marcy through the hallway window. She looked right at me. Then she turned away." The room felt smaller. Not because of what Richard and Elaine had done, because of how many people had let them do it. Little pieces from the past few weeks started sliding into place. My mother calling to ask, "Is Noah still insisting on all that?" My father saying, "Just work the shift, Claire. The family will handle him." Elaine texting me 3 days later for Noah's old birth certificate, claiming she was updating family records. At the time, I had been too tired to question it. Now every word had teeth. "Did they give you food?" I asked. Noah shook his head. "Did they ask how you were getting home?" "No." I opened my phone and pulled up his rideshare receipt. The pickup time stared back at me. 5:26 p.m., 8 minutes. He had been on their porch, in their hallway, in their sight, for only 8 minutes before they sent him back into the cold. There had been no argument, no awkward scramble, no honest mistake. They had made the decision before he ever arrived. Noah watched my face carefully. "Please don't call them." "I'm not calling them." He looked surprised. I stood and walked to the counter. I took a photo of the unopened pie. Then I took screenshots of his text, the rideshare receipt, and the family group chat pictures with that empty chair at the end of the table. Noah sat up straighter. "What are you doing?" "Listening to you." I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and logged into the shared family cloud folder my mother used for holiday menus, photos, and seating plans. There were folders for Christmas, Easter, birthdays. Then I saw one near the top, recently edited. Thanksgiving seating, final. I clicked it. The file opened before I was ready for it. At first, it looked ordinary, a neat little seating chart with my mother's careful formatting, names in boxes, table positions, notes about serving dishes and who needed extra napkins because my Uncle Dennis always spilled gravy. Then I saw Noah's name. Not missing, not forgotten, crossed out. A red line had been dragged straight through it, so thick it almost cut the letters in half. Beside his name, my mother had typed one sentence: "Do not accommodate if he arrives." I stared at those words until the screen blurred. Noah was asleep again behind me, curled into the couch with the blanket pulled up to his chin. I turned the laptop slightly so the light would not hit his face. Then I kept reading. Under the seating chart was a section titled Family Notes. My mother had written, "Keep evening peaceful. Do not reward Claire's choices. Richard will handle door if necessary." If necessary. As if my child showing up for Thanksgiving dinner with a pie was an emergency to manage. There were initials next to some of the notes. EM for Elaine Mercer, RM for Richard Mercer, and beside one line about avoiding disruption in front of the children, there was an M, Marcy. I took screenshots of every page. Then I printed the seating chart. The printer clicked and hummed in the quiet apartment, each sheet sliding out like proof my parents had been foolish enough to leave behind. At 9 a.m., I pulled into their driveway. Their house looked exactly the way it always did the morning after Thanksgiving. Wreath on the door, pumpkins lined along the steps, warm yellow light in the dining room, 2 extra cars in the driveway because relatives always came back for leftovers. I sat there for one breath. Then I picked up the unopened pie from the passenger seat and walked to the front door. My father opened it. His expression changed before he spoke. Not guilt, irritation. "Claire," he said, "this is not a good time." I stepped past him. In the dining room, my mother was setting out coffee cups. Aunt Marcy stood near the sideboard with a casserole dish. Uncle Dennis was buttering a roll. 2 cousins were scrolling their phones at the table. The empty chair was still there, pushed in neatly. Waiting. I placed the pumpkin pie in the center of the table. The plastic lid made a dull sound against the wood. Everyone stopped moving. My mother's hand tightened around the coffee pot. "What are you doing?" I looked at my father first, bringing back the dessert Noah wasn't allowed to eat. A cousin lifted his head. Aunt Marcy looked down so fast it was almost an answer. Richard shut the front door behind him. "This is not the time." I turned toward him. "That is exactly what you said to my son." My mother inhaled sharply. Noah chose to leave. No one forced anything. I took out my phone and opened the rideshare receipt. 8 minutes, I said. Elaine blinked. "What?" "He arrived at 5:18. The driver picked him up at 5:26. You didn't have a conversation. You didn't try to make room. You sent him away before his coat was even warm from the car. My father's jaw tightened. You are making a scene. No, I said. You made one. I'm just showing people where it started. I swiped to the family photo from the night before and held up the screen. There was an empty chair. One of my cousins leaned forward. There was an empty chair? He said. My mother's face hardened. That chair was not for him. The room went quiet in a different way, not shocked. Caught. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed seating chart. I laid it beside the pie. Noah Mercer. A red line through his name. Do not accommodate if he arrives. Uncle Dennis pushed his chair back. Elaine. My mother said nothing. He picked up the page and read it again, slower this time. You planned this? Richard took one step forward. Put that down. But Dennis did not. Aunt Marcy's face had gone pale. She stared at the floor like the hardwood might open and give her somewhere to hide. I looked at her. You saw him at the door. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. My father moved between me and the table. You're humiliating this family. I almost laughed, but it came out cold. No, you humiliated a 15-year-old child in a nice sweater holding a pie. Elaine slammed the coffee pot onto the sideboard. Coffee splashed onto her hand, but she did not react. You have no idea what we have been trying to prevent, she said. This was supposed to be the beginning of a larger conversation you keep refusing to have. There it was. Larger conversation. The words dropped into the room, and my father's eyes flashed toward her. Elaine, he snapped. But it was too late. I looked from my mother to my father. What larger conversation? Richard turned to everyone else. Leave the room. No one moved at first. Then the cousins stood. Uncle Dennis folded the seating chart once but kept it in his hand. Aunt Marcy backed toward the kitchen without looking at me. When the dining room cleared, my father walked to the entry table and picked up a sealed envelope. He pushed it against my chest. Open it tomorrow, he said quietly. And remember who paid for your life. I sat in my car with the envelope on my lap. The house behind me still glowed with Thanksgiving warmth. Curtains open, candles burning, people moving through the kitchen like nothing irreversible had happened. My hands would not stop shaking. For 10 minutes, I did not open the envelope. I just stared at my father's handwriting on the front. Claire. No mom, no dad, no explanation. Just my name written like a warning. When I finally slid my finger under the flap, I expected a lecture, maybe some printed article my mother had saved, maybe a church pamphlet, maybe one of my father's long, polished letters about respect and tradition. It was worse. The first page had a law firm letterhead, Mercer Family Property Trust. My eyes moved down the page once, then again, because the words refused to arrange themselves into something real. I had been removed as successor manager of my late grandmother's rental property trust. The reason listed was instability within the household and failure to preserve family values. I sat there so still that the car engine hummed around me like it belonged to someone else. Failure to preserve family values. My son had been sent home alone from Thanksgiving, and they had already turned it into evidence against me. I looked back at the house. My father was visible through the front window, standing in the dining room with his back to me, one hand on his hip, giving instructions. My mother stood beside him, arms folded tightly, her face pale. They had not panicked because I found the seating chart. They had panicked because the seating chart connected to this. I read the letter again. The change had been initiated 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks. The same week my mother called and asked, "Is Noah still insisting on all that?" The same week my father told me, "Just work the shift, Claire. The family will handle him." The same week, Elaine asked me for Noah's old birth certificate for family records. Every small, strange request had been part of one long rope, and Thanksgiving was where they had planned to pull it tight. I drove home without calling them. When I walked into the apartment, Noah was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal he had barely touched. He looked at the envelope in my hand. "What is that?" I set my keys down carefully. Something your grandfather wanted me to be afraid of. His spoon stopped halfway to the bowl. Are you? I looked at him, at the dark circles under his eyes, at the sweater he still had not changed out of, because maybe changing clothes would make the night real. No, I said, not anymore. I took the letter to my bedroom and called the attorney listed at the top. A receptionist answered first, then there was hold music, then a man with a careful voice came on the line. This is Thomas Bell. My name is Claire Mercer, I said. I received a letter from your office about the Mercer Family Property Trust. A pause. Yes, Ms. Mercer. I have one question before I send you anything. Another pause. All right. Did my parents tell you that a 15-year-old child was turned away from Thanksgiving dinner last night as part of this concern about family values? Silence. Not polite silence. Not legal silence. A silence that changed the room. Mr. Bell cleared his throat. I'm not sure I understand. My son arrived at their house at 5:18 p.m. with dessert. They told him there was no seat for him. He was picked up by a rideshare at 5:26. I have the receipt. I have the family photo showing an empty chair. I have their seating chart with his name crossed out and a note saying not to accommodate him. The attorney did not speak. I continued, so I'm asking whether your office knew a minor was being deliberately excluded and then used as part of a claim that my household is unstable. His voice changed when he came back on the line. Lower. Slower. Ms. Mercer, I cannot discuss privileged communications. I understand. But if you have documentation relevant to the circumstances described in that letter, you should send it to me. I turned toward the hallway. Noah had come closer, standing where he could hear but pretending not to. Mr. Bell added, Send everything. I did. The seating chart, the rideshare receipt, the family photos, screenshots of my mother's messages, a scan of the attorney letter. Then I asked Noah if he wanted to write what happened in his own words. He sat at the laptop for 20 minutes. He typed slowly, not dramatic, not angry, just the facts. I arrived. Grandpa opened the door. He said there was no seat. Grandma said it was easier for everyone. I saw Aunt Marcy. No one asked if I had somewhere to go. I went home. When he finished, he pushed the laptop toward me and whispered, Is that enough? I looked at the page. It should never have needed to be. By evening, my phone buzzed while I was reheating soup. Aunt Marcy. For a second, I almost ignored it. Then I opened the text. Claire, I'm sorry. I should have said something. I stared at the screen, waiting. Another message appeared. They told us Noah had become dangerous and unstable. Elaine said he had been manipulating you and that Thanksgiving needed boundaries. My jaw tightened. I typed back with one hand. Did anyone put that in writing? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then Marcy sent 6 screenshots from a relatives-only group chat I had never been invited to. I opened the first one. Elaine had written, Claire refuses to see what is happening in her own home. The second screenshot showed Richard saying, No one is to undermine us at Thanksgiving. If he appears, direct him to me. The third was my mother again. Tomorrow will be the first step in making Claire understand consequences. I read that line 3 times. Consequences. That was what my parents called leaving my son alone in a dark apartment on Thanksgiving. Not cruelty. Not rejection. A step. I printed everything. Page after page slid out onto the kitchen table. Noah stood beside me, silent, while the stack grew thicker. I made 2 copies, one for the attorney, one for my parents. Then I placed the seating chart on top, followed by the rideshare receipt, the photo of the empty chair, Marcy's screenshots, Elaine's messages, the trust letter, and Noah's statement in his own words. I slid them into one large envelope. On the front, I wrote, Richard and Elaine Mercer. The next morning, I drove to their house before my shift. I did not knock. I placed the envelope against the front door, stepped back to my car, and waited. At 8:12 a.m., my father opened the door in his robe. He looked down, picked it up, tore it open, and from inside the house, my mother screamed. My father stood frozen on the porch, holding the pages like they had burned him. Inside the house, my mother shouted, "Claire copied everything!" I stepped out of my car. The envelope contained the seating chart, the rideshare receipt, the empty chair photo, the group chat screenshots, the attorney letter, and Noah's statement. On top was my note. "I know the truth. You did not run out of seats. You created a test. You wanted my son humiliated, isolated, and sent home alone so I would choose your approval over him. I will not." Richard stormed down the steps. "You ungrateful girl." I held up my phone. "Mr. Bell has every page." His face changed. Elaine appeared behind him, pale and furious. "We were trying to save this family." "No," I said. "You were trying to control it." The truth was simple now. The empty chair had always been there. Noah's exclusion was never practical. It was symbolic. The trust letter was the threat. The birth certificate request, the group chat, the seating chart, all of it had been planned to make me look unstable and force me to send Noah away. By that afternoon, the attorney paused the trust changes for review. Uncle Dennis removed Richard from managing the family holiday fund. Marcy called Noah and apologized. Noah listened quietly, then said, "Thank you for telling the truth," and gave the phone back. I cut off unsupervised contact. My parents lost access to Noah's school events, birthdays, and medical decisions. Months later, I hosted dinner in our apartment. The table was crowded, warm, and loud. Noah sat between two cousins who chose him over silence. An extra chair stayed folded near the wall. That was the last holiday my parents ever decided who belonged at my table.